Hi everyone, welcome. We're down here in my wormery, and what you see behind me are a couple of systems that I've got some harvested castings in. So technically only those stacked up bins over there are my oldest active systems. The castings that are in these bins over here are only being kept around because I've got bait boxes in them. Trying to gather up the straggler worms that were not collected up and transferred into their new homes. So over here are the stragglers from the retired original red wiggler systems, and the worms that came out of those are actually living right here in these two tubs on the bench. And then very similarly, I've got a couple other tubs over on the shelf over there that the worms that came out of these castings live in. And similarly, my assumption was that I've got stragglers in there too. So I got bait boxes running in both systems, bait boxes that have been going now for 31 days, because after the harvest of these castings I waited 2 days before establishing the bait box. And here the bait box was set up on day 1, 22 days ago, when those red wigglers were hauled out of these castings and relocated into a new home. So the theme of the day today is family reunion. So I'm not focusing so much on feeding the worm bins, but I figured, before doing anything else, why not just go ahead and give these little guys a quick feeding, even though it's already been 7 days in the case of the original red wigglers. 7 days really isn't usually enough of a lapse in time for me to want to come back and feed the little guys again, but as long as I was going to be arranging a quick reunion, I figured why not just throw in a few morsels and then they'll be good again for a little while longer. So I'm going to try to buzz through the feeding portion of both of these and try to focus the video more on family reunion and the conclusion of the baiting process. So that's what we're going to try to get done here. So let's feed, and then we can proceed to reuniting the wormies with their families. So now just a quick pause. 7 days ago when we fed the original red wigglers, we gave each system a whole pair, and I could see the whole pair is still kind of intact over here, but when I excavated, oh, there it is. I knew it was just a matter of me going to search for it. So let's get these little guys fed. Alright, so my reason for covering up bin number 2 and leaving bin number 1 open was because, as you can see, the estimated worm count in bin number 2, 2,864 worms are thought to live over here in bin number 2, as opposed to the 2,764 worms thought to live in bin number 1. So bin number 1 is the one where we're going to be dropping the reunited worms that come out of the bait box over in the harvested castings straggler bin. So let's set bin number 2 aside and get the bin with the worm castings out here. Alrighty. So now, one thing I've not been capturing on video is the multiple times that I've been in here to aerate and check on these bait boxes, because I have a couple guys getting a little bit of an advanced introduction into their new home. So I think we've got everyone. Oh, there's one more right there. Right, so 3 worms going in and whatever remains in the bait box to follow. So now, something I've been doing on a pretty regular basis, coming in to aerate this material, and that means to take all of this dry stuff that's out on the perimeter, not covered with anything, and submerge it down into the more damp stuff below, ultimately bringing the overall moisture level of all the material in these systems down each time by blending in all that dry stuff. And usually it was down here in the very, very low reaches where I would still bump into a worm or two, and I thought I saw a little bit of movement there. Kind of making me question if this is a premature move, you know? I mean, there's another one right there. I guess, you know, the tendency of the worms, I believe, once they start sensing their environment becoming a bit overly dry and inhospitable, is to dive, perhaps not to climb. So I'm not even so sure about this bait box scenario being the optimal or not, because it does seem like I still have a tendency to find a worm or two down within these castings, especially when I probe down into the lowest reaches, down into the very bottom, where I'm assuming the worms are diving to in search of moisture and more comfortable material. And, you know, at some point they'll just sort of run out of room to dive into once they get to the very bottom. And I would imagine that there's nothing in their, I guess, wiring or whatever the right concept is, their thinking, if you want to consider it as that, to go to the surface in search of more hospitable material. So I suppose ongoing baiting of this material could continue, but any worms left behind in this stuff, I suppose you can see it as a silver lining, is that no, they're not going to be reunited with the family, but there's a pretty good likelihood that they're going to be released out into the wild as part of gardening, because we're now in spring and the time has come to build up my garden. I've been working on it for a few days. I've got all my little seedlings outside getting hardened off, is that the right expression? Basically getting them accustomed to bright natural sunlight versus being under the grow light here in my basement. So the grow light has been turned off. The plants are just awaiting the opportunity to get put down into the dirt to continue their growth there. And at that time, this stuff will definitely come into play, and any worms in it will be free. So I think we're now done officially with this batch of castings. I'm going to treat this as depopulated, truly harvested, and I know it's a little bit of a fib because here and there a little wormy is still showing up, but now on to the main event. And this is the part where I'm really going to turn to you guys as the viewers to once again provide me with some information as to how many worms we're going to be releasing into here, because even here, when we established this worm count of 2764 in bin number 1, that was a joint effort. We did it together. We arrived at that number by everyone kicking in their idea as to how many worms they believe just got added to the system, and then I average all those numbers together. So this is where I'm going to ask you to take a really good, careful, close look at what we're doing here and provide me with your estimate in the comments as to how many worms are being released. So let's make that happen. Oh wow, we got a nice turnout here. We got a little bit of muddy material down here at the bottom of the bait box, which I think we can tend to in a moment. I think now, while all these little guys are still pretty easy to see before they all start diving down to retreat from the bright lights, this might be our opportunity to take a quick look at these little guys And then I'll be really looking forward to hearing what everyone thinks in terms of just how many worms we've managed to round up over here. Well, I must say it didn't take very long for those worms to duck out of view, to retreat from the bright lights. They don't like the bright lights, that's for sure. And over here I've managed to round up just a couple more, hiding out in this kind of muddy stuff. I would come in here not to add food, but to just make sure that the material in the bait box is sufficiently moist so that any worms finding themselves in the stuff would definitely consider themselves to be in the most optimal place and most damp place that they can be, versus climbing back down into that dry material over there. So I believe that that brings us to the official conclusion of the baiting process of straggler worms in the harvested castings from 33 days ago for the original red wiggler wormies. So I believe we've got them all. I probed around with my hand initially just to make sure we didn't miss anybody, and then I figured perhaps with this stick I can do a little bit better, revealing any other little guys that were left behind. But don't leave yet, because this is only halfway through. We've still got 2 other bins of red wigglers to feed and to do a similar reunion with. So I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a reset here, try to get things tidied up, and we'll be able to do a quick repeat of what we just accomplished here. So let's make that happen next. Alright, well, that was fun. Now that we're done with the original red wigglers and we've reunited those straggler worms with the lesser populated new bin, we're over to the younger bin of red wigglers, which are out here on the bench already. And once again, it's bin number 1 over here that's thought to have the fewer number of worms living in it at 2,833 worms, and over 3,274 worms thought to occupy bin number 2. So once again, our aim is to reunite straggler worms over in the bait box with the worms that live over here in bin number 1. But first we're going to feed. So, like I said, this is more or less a rinse and repeat as before. So hopefully everything goes as smoothly on this one. Knock on wood. Let's see how that goes. Oh, how do you like that? I didn't kick into high speed again because I just happened to notice, once again, like I noticed when I first opened up the original red wiggler systems, that there's mating worms right there on the surface. It must be the season. And we're missing a feeding zone indicator, or are we? Was there one and it was eaten, or did it adhere to the top coverings? I don't know. It does seem we're down a feeding zone indicator. All right, on with the feeding. All right, we all know what comes next. It's checking out that bait box. But you know what? Silly me. I should have known better than to not cover up. I just sort of got into the groove of feeding worm bins and I got distracted by not needing to narrate. So, this is where we're going to be dropping the contents of the bait box. Hopefully we got a nice turnout. One thing I've been doing each time I check in, or more specifically what I've not been doing, is I've not been peeking into the bait boxes whatsoever. Every time I would come in here to aerate, whether on camera or off, I would always resist the temptation to peek underneath that paper. No, I mean, that's not true. I think I did actually pull the paper up just so I can get in there with my squirt bottle to make sure moisture was high, and kind of going in there and soaking things really quick, but not picking around to see how many worms came to hang out. So what you're seeing here is as much of a surprise to you as it is to me. So let's I guess, before we dig in, why don't we see if we can ensure that there's as many stragglers collected as possible. Sometimes I even wonder if these are really stragglers. So many of them are so small. I would not be surprised if some of the ones that I see are ones that were actually born. So maybe this is in a way a cocoon nursery too. In the past I had always treated this sort of stuff as cocoon nursery. The castings left behind by the worms after they get hauled out and relocated. Just seems like the only thing remaining is the cocoons they left behind, and given a little bit of time, you could end up with a couple extra wormies that you would have otherwise just ended up releasing out into the wild. So this stuff, I guess, even though this stuff was only doing this for 22 days versus the other stuff doing it for 29 days, it does seem like we've somehow managed to achieve better depopulation of this material. What's going on? Do I have a light bulb about to blow out? I thought I saw a little flicker earlier too, but I sort of ignored it, but now I thought I saw another one. So I thought I saw a wormy in here, and I probably did. Like I said, this stuff is going to all get used pretty soon out in the garden. I don't think it'll dry so much more that it should cause us any concern whatsoever. So there we go, 2 batches of castings in one day. Fun stuff. But that's not what we're here to look at, right? We're here to check out the little wormies. And as we did previously, please don't forget to leave me a quick comment. I really appreciate it. I love looking at everyone's feedback when we estimate how many worms are released into these systems or added to these systems. So in this case, we're simply adding some worms. So I'll play with this a little bit offline, but now I think it's time to let these little guys get caught up with their friends and relatives that they've been out of touch with for the past few weeks. And yeah, lots of little worms. Possibly a lot of little guys that were actually just born over here in the bait box or in the castings. All right, well, I stepped aside for a moment to try to round up these worms, and no, I was using my finger, not the stick. Sorry, people are probably yelling at me on the video of, hey, why are you poking those wormies? Well, they're probably not too happy about me pushing them around with my fingers either. I'm sure they would just prefer to be left alone, but at this point, getting them off this box is key. I'll probably take both of these bait boxes outside and rinse them out in the garden just so there's, a better chance at any wormies that might just still be hiding in this stuff to still have a chance. So that'll be my little insurance policy for not having a guilty conscience. But naturally, the more the better, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what everyone thinks in terms of how many worms we've just rounded up and released back into their primary populations and gotten them out of our castings and yielding a really nice harvest of a whole bunch of this stuff. Look at all this. 2 nice big bins full of this stuff, and as I might have shown in a previous video not too long ago, I've got a whole bunch of it. So I've got a few things to do here, just kind of quality control, make sure I haven't left anyone behind, do a quick rinse, make that priority, tend to the storage of this stuff, or perhaps even better yet, the use of this stuff out in the garden. So that's it for the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.